numbers of my family. That I was born a couple of centuries too late. And all of my hobbies would seem to reflect that fact, at least until recently. So I think what I'm going to kind of do today is give you a background as to what I'm good at and what I've tried, which is a lot of stuff. And then if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me because it's a huge, gigantic field and I do a bunch of stupid stuff. So if you find anything interesting you'd like me to talk about, I would be absolutely happy to do so. So I'm going to go ahead and give you an overview of, I guess, kind of the blacksmithing stuff I do, and then some of the other crafts that I work on. And most of them happen to be things that would be like at home in the 1500s. So yeah, that's how it's going to work. So I actually am a blacksmith, and the first thing one would think of when you blacksmith is a forge. So I was about 8, and I decided that I wanted to be a blacksmith. And of course I needed a forge, so I was tired of just like making a campfire and sticking a nail in and then hammering it down. And then, oh hey, gentlemen, we just started. How was your trip? You finally get back, or when did you get back?
Got back today, 3 hours ago.
So I just introduced it. My chat's title is Armory, Blacksmithing and Armory Management for the Discerning Medieval Knight. So I'll be talking mostly about blacksmithing. And if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt.
Are others not showing up?
Rock will be late.
Yeah.
I think Sebi's probably in a test still. And then I think so. John said he could not. So.
I feel like missing wood just
well, Jackson is going as well. I don't know where Jackson is in Charlotte. They weren't responding, so I don't know. I can check. Unless anyone's heard from my brain. No, no one's gotten back to me. So. I don't know. That's no idea. So. Oh wow. So this is my forge, and I built this because I wanted a forge, and my dad said that he would help me build one. So I took a car tire rim because it was what was lying around, and so I effectively just attached a tube to the bottom of it, put it on a bunch of cinder blocks, and put coal in it, and light it on fire with my MAP gas torch, and then called it a day. I also always had water because I'm a very nice person and I don't cause forest fires. But yeah, so that was the only like real problem that my parents had is if I didn't have water. Other than that, I could light a fire whenever I wanted. So that was my hobby. So this is a really like podunk forge. I think you've seen bigger ones that have a pretty nice deal where you got a whole pile of coal and you just like shuffle a little bit of coal. My grandmother actually gave me coal for Christmas one year, which was awesome and both very ironic. Because it's hard for me to get coal when I'm in the middle of New York or North Carolina, but she was able to find it somewhere because she was in the mountains. So I used that, and I still have quite a bit of it left. So this is my anvil, again, another Christmas present from my grandmother. And so this is just me kind of sitting on a stump, and that's what I would hammer on. So really low tech, but hey, blacksmithing is low tech. And then this is just a sword that I haven't made, but I like it because it was a good picture of mine. So I'll talk to you a little bit about how I actually use the swords later. But the idea is you kind of have to have the heat source, and then you go and you put whatever you're trying to hammer in, and then wait until it's hot, and then have fun and use your anvil to hammer. So I started out making knives. This is about 7 inches long from the center part to the tip. And I was going to make this for my brother. He actually now has it because I didn't finish it in time before I went to college. But I started hammering nails and then just sharpening them, and then I went from there because I get bored with that. So this is actually a file. So I took a file, and it's really hard to steel. And so I just sit at a grinder for hours and like wait till it was the right size, and then sharpen it up. And then I take and I narrow the other half of it down so that I'd be able to put a handle on it. I'll kind of show you a few examples of that later. I actually do have an example of a knife that I have made, which you can't really know exists because we don't know if you hear that. So this is a boot knife that I made. So I also did leatherworking, so it has a sheath. But it's kind of like that knife because it's a full-time knife. So I take and I make the blade, and then I narrow down the handle, and then you can actually see the rest of the knife blade through the edge of it. scare you, you're welcome to just pass it along. But you're also welcome to play with it if you like. Just don't stab yourself. Although I do have first aid. So that's what I did for quite a while. It was pretty fun. It's small. You can sand them. You can just do stuff. Yep.
Have you actually handled that? Is there like a process?
So I would first do that, and then oftentimes I would take and I would make the guard. So if you look at the guard as it comes along, it's a piece of brass. So I would take and I would drill press a slot in a piece of brass, and then I would take and slide that on the tank. So you slide that like washer-looking thing on top of it, and then after that, that one's actually cord wrapped. So under the leather, there's a piece of hemp rope. So I take and I wrap the handle in rope, and then on top of that, I would put the cap, the pommel on the end, which is the other little brass washer. And then on top of that, I put leather that I epoxied on. And then on top of that, I put the wrapping, which is the copper. So that's how I kind of wrap it. You can do it different ways. Like a sword always has to have wood on it because it's just too big. You wouldn't be able to just wrap enough rope around it to hold it with gold. So that's how I managed to do that for that small thing. That's just like a throwing knife, so it doesn't really have to be sturdy. But larger knives do have wood. So once I'm done with this, I can either go and I can temper it, so I stick it to the fire and then wait till it's hot and then quench it, and that makes it harder, especially if it's high carbon steel. Or I can just leave it like that. It depends on what you're going to do with it. That one is actually not tempered because I do not want it to break when it throws into a tree. Of all the stupid things I've done throwing knife related, I threw a tempered file at a tree and it bounced off and promptly hit my mother's windshield and cracked it. So I was not expecting that, but it was because it's like a spring steel. So I had to walk in while Mom was making dinner and explain why I had supposedly thrown a knife in my mother's car, which was not actually what I did. It just bounced off the tree. But again, it's not really hard to explain that. So beyond that, I moved on to more interesting things. This is a sword cane that I made. So whenever I would go walking in the neighborhood, I had my cane with me, which I guess is old-fashioned, but it was because it was also spiky. So this thing is about 3 feet long, so it's like yay high. And that is the tip of the sword cane, so I took and I sharpened that down. Then the entire thing was actually a C-clamp. So you take, it's like a gigantic bar clamp that you would use to like hold wood together and stuff. I just ripped off the clamp part, and I have this now pretty nice piece of steel in the middle of it. So I would sharpen that up. And then I ended up using a copper pipe as the handle. So this is just a big like plumbing piece of copper. And like I did with that knife, I took and I wrapped a bunch of cord around it, put the leather on it, and then wrapped it with wire. So that's the rough handle. And then inside, I would actually have, this is the sharp part of the sword cane, and then the actual handle of the sword cane is wrapped in leather and ribbon up there. And then anyone guess what the top is? That's a plumb bottle. The old-fashioned, like you're just hanging from a string. That's the only piece of brass I could find on such short goods. So, I don't know, I scrounged around a lot, but it was pretty fun. And my brother was nice enough to hold this for me, so I took a picture of it. So, and then beyond that, I make a bunch of other fun stuff. So this is actually something I made for my dad. It's a tomahawk. Anyone know what that's made out of? Again, the theme of scrounging. But, no, that is actually a railroad spike. So I took a railroad spike legally off of a train wreck, and I ended up hammering that with my forge, and I made a tomahawk out of it. So that was a gift for my dad because it was pretty fun, and I enjoy tomahawk throwing. So you effectively just heat that up and then bash it in a forge, and I'll show you a video of it later. But the idea is, again, you're just heating up and smashing with a hammer. It's very therapeutic. It's pretty fun. So that was one thing I did. And then I also have done other stuff. So I actually did some furnace work. So a furnace is a little difficult because you have to get to a really high temperature. So I've actually taken and done a bunch of stuff. I had sandstone in my yard. So I took a gigantic block of sandstone, which is this thing over here. So that's effectively talc. That's what they make baby powder of. And the cool thing is it has no moisture in it, and it's a rock that I can actually carve. So I effectively dug a hole in it, and then I would stick a torch in the edge of it so that it would like, so there's a hole right here that would go through so that I could poke my butane torch in, and then I would effectively have a little cyclone of like butane burning in there. And then you effectively just use a little crucible up there that I'll show you. I use this little thing, little bitty crucible, and I throw that in the talc rock and then wait till it heats up. So I melted like silver a bunch, and I've also done aluminum. I have not yet done gold, but that is something that I could do if I were actually brave and had the money. So it's pretty fun and I enjoy it, but it's a little difficult because you'll always oxidize stuff. So you have to take and you actually use like dish soap to make sure it doesn't oxidize. So it was pretty fun because when I went and I worked on Formula Hybrid race car the first semester when I got here, they were thinking about casting their uprights in aluminum. And it was hilarious because I was giving a senior advice on how to do lost wax casting because he didn't know what he was doing. Effectively, you take and you carve a thing out of wax, and then you put it in plaster Paris, and then you very carefully flip that upside down in your mother's oven and heat it up on clean until all the wax falls off. And you hope that you've caught all the wax in the bin that you haven't gone in the oven. And then while your parents are sleeping, you hope all the smoke dissipates, and then you have effectively a negative in the plaster Paris that you use to do stuff. So that is what I was going to talk to you about next. So this is a good example of some artist rendering of actually how you do that. So say I wanted to make arrowheads. I would take and I would make a wax model of an arrowhead. And then I take and I add a sprue, which is this piece here, which is just a sacrificial, not really part of the arrowhead. But you take and make this entire thing out of wax, and then you effectively shove it in clay or plaster Paris in that case. So this is how they did stuff for like thousands of years. You would take and you would make a model of something, you would add a bunch of clay, you put it in a mold, and then you effectively flip the entire thing upside down, melt out all the wax, and then you would pour in gold or whatever you wanted to pour in. And then all of a sudden you have this now metal piece that looks exactly like a wax piece. So it's really low tech, and that's actually what people still do today for art. So it was fun for me because I can melt aluminum. Aluminum's not hard to melt. I can also melt silver if I'm really careful, and I don't mind wasting like tens of dollars on silver that I'm going to oxidize. So in this case, they have arrowheads that were a result of that. One actual real reason that this is used, at least up until modern times, was for dental work. So my grandfather actually was a dentist, and so he did the lost wax method casting for this. So he made me a tie tack that is out of gold, that is a seahorse. I think people may have seen me wear it before. But the idea is the same. They would carve a really small thing of a filling or something like that for a dentist, or in this case, of a seahorse because it was fun. And they put that in the wax, or to make that out of wax, they put that in the clay, and then you take and melt the wax out, and then you have an egg. So that's a really popular thing, and that's something that we've been doing for thousands of years, and overall, pretty interesting way of doing various things. So in this case, this is actually an artist doing that with an acetylene torch. So yeah, effectively heating stuff up, pouring it in this crucible, and this crucible has a negative that he's trying to work with. And then from there, he'll go on to wash it out and remove plaster Paris. The one dangerous thing is if you have any water or wax left in plaster Paris, it will explode. So I would actually take, and I learned that the hard time the first time, because I was melting lead. So I took a bunch of lead, and I had like this much lead that I was pouring into this cast. And then I had left some water in there or something like that. And the whole thing like broke apart, and then a bunch of like lead just like went everywhere. So that was not very, very smart of me, I guess. But the way I figured out to get around that is just using a coffee can. So I would take and I would put the wax bottle upside down in a coffee can, and then I would pour the plaster Paris around it. And then if the thing exploded, it would like kind of be held by the coffee can, so at least there would be ones in metal everywhere. So I can't do stuff that intricate because I don't have the temperatures required to melt gold. The temperature required to melt aluminum is like, you can do that with a campfire. It's not that bad. The hard part is keeping it from oxidizing. One interesting thing you pick up, because I did a bunch of metallurgy research, anyone know the major export of Iceland? Any guesses? So the major export of Iceland is actually aluminum, because the cost of smelting aluminum is pretty high. Not because it's actually like not hard to get aluminum, or not because it's not prolific, it's like a really common element. But because when you have to forge it, you have to forge it in vacuum. So they actually have to spend a lot of energy to get the furnaces high enough that no oxygen will reach the aluminum, or else it'll just burn. So the first couple of times I tried to smelt aluminum, I would just burn it up, and you wouldn't be able to get anything out of it. But later, again, I ended up buying a huge thing of dish detergent. I think it's borax. So I don't know if it's like, I guess it's dish detergent. I don't really know. I don't really care. I didn't read it. But you take and you actually spread that over whatever it is you're doing that's hot, and it makes like an oil layer on it, so that it won't oxidize. So that's how I got around that. That was pretty fun.
So why is IC that nice for? Is it
So the geothermal energy is really cheap. Sorry, I guess I didn't finish that. The geothermal energy in Iceland is very cheap. So they're actually able to export the aluminum, which is effectively exporting energy, because it's a process that everyone needs to have done to process, but they can do it so cheap because of their energy. So it's odd. It's a cop out of actually, instead of putting power lines anywhere, they're able to just make something that's very power intensive and then ship it along. So yeah. So this is actually an example of kind of what I was talking about with that. So a jeweler, you will actually take and they will carve your ring, if you ask for like a wedding ring to be made, out of wax. So in this case, this would be a negative that they take and carved out of wax. And then this is the sprue, that's the gold that is kind of left over. They'll recycle that, that's not that bad. And each of these rings would just be attached to that sprue. And then this was upside down, and they poured gold into it, and then we're able to smell it. And then once it cools, you have 2 rings there, and then they'll clean it up, and they'll sell it as jewelry. So that's the overall process, and that's actually kind of what jewelers do today. So, and then this is a fun picture of me. This is me at 14. I dressed up in my dad's suit of chainmail armor because it was fun and it was Halloween. So this is a sword I made, which was the same one that we saw earlier. And then this is, I think, 23 pounds of chainmail, I think. So it's like 3 gallons of milk being carried on your shoulders. It was pretty fun. It's actually really distributed. But it was really fun too because, of course, we had a sword. So my dad and I like took turns poking each other while we were in the armor, which is pretty fun. And I don't know, it was interesting, but at the same time incredibly heavy. Like I couldn't imagine actually walking around with it. In Halloween it was cold enough, but like in the middle of summer, you would have just boiled alive. Because you also have to wear a really thick like wool or like fleece shirt under it, or else you would get pinched by all the rings. So it was really just not comfortable, but pretty cool to be walking around for Halloween. So I was happy about that. So on to chainmail. Chainmail is another thing that I do. It's pretty fun, and I guess it's weird because it looks really simple, and it's like it's weaving that's very repetitive and zen-like, I guess, but it's different and it's actually cool. So I'm very biased, but this is the type of chainmail that we're all familiar with. If it actually goes that way. Cool. So this is classic chainmail. If you ever find anyone wearing chainmail, it's going to look like this. This is what Europeans wore forever and ever and ever. And it's really just a bunch of rings, like every other. Really easy. You can pick this up. I can mirror everything you're doing. It looks kind of difficult, but all these are just split rings. Oftentimes, people who were actually using it in like battle would take and they would rivet the rings. So you would take each individual ring, you would have a hole in it, and you have to stick a wire through the hole, and then you have to braid the anvil, and you have to tap to close the ring, and you repeat that like 13,000 times to get a suit of chainmail. So that is a really arduous process, but it's also not one of the more fun or decorative examples. So of the people that go to the APO office, I did actually finish. I made my mother a bracelet for Mother's Day, and it is chainmail. So it's a slightly different pattern of chainmail. This one's called Byzantine chainmail. So it takes, and I think it's 6-in-1 ring. So that type of chainmail is kind of decorative, and you really wouldn't do anything with it except make a bracelet for your mother. So okay, but it's kind of cool because you can do a bunch of different interesting things with it, and it's kind of fun because you can do like gold or silver rings. So that's my hobby, and that's what I do when I'm on the couch and really bored. Because I don't have the patience to make a full suit of chainmail, but I can do it for fun occasionally. This is a different type of chainmail pattern. This is a half Persian weave. So that was Byzantine. This is half Persian, and I'll pass this around. The same thing. There are so many different